I understand how difficult this moment is. After the billions of pounds it cost us to combat COVID, after all the dislocation that caused, in the midst of a terrible war, and I understand too that I have work to do to restore trust after all that has happened. So I stand here before you, ready to lead our country into the future, to put your needs above politics.
All right, that was Rishi Sunak at 10 Downing Street. And remember, he takes charge at a time when UK is facing several economic challenges. Let's discuss more with Professor Scott Lucas of University of Dublin. And we're also joined by Richar Heald of UK India Business Council. Richard, if I can begin with you, he said in his speech that there is a profound economic crisis that UK is facing currently, and he has been chosen to fix some of Liz Truss's mistakes as well. How do the business chambers in the UK react to his becoming the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom?
Well, I think that the reaction from the UK is, if you like, characterised by the reaction in the markets at the present moment. We've seen a certain stability in certainly in the FTSE 250, which is the bellwether, if you like, for the UK economy. And also we've seen certain stability in the currency markets as well. So I think it's a good initial reaction, positive reaction, welcoming reaction. We'll have to see how the cabinet comes together. But as you rightly say, his key focus has got to be to address the hole in the UK's finances at this present moment in time. And we will find out a little bit more about that when the OBR makes its report in a few days' time.
Right. 31st of October is what we will be keeping an eye out for. Professor Lucas, how critical is it for Rishi Sunak to put things back on track on the economic front in order to further solidify and strengthen his political position?
I think Richar Heald points out that the first task, and Rishi Sunak called it stability, was to reassure the markets, to reassure the financial sector that there's some type of competence back in 10 Downing Street. But that's just a short-term measure, because here's, if you will, the broader context, the elephant in the room. And that is that Rishi Sunak cannot deal in the medium or long term, or at least won't be dealing with the fundamental problem, which is that the UK's position is damaged. The UK's economic position is damaged because of Brexit and the way that it has been implemented. Rishi Sunak is not proposing, of course, to roll back Brexit. He's not proposing to reconnect in a single market with Europe. And so all you can do is manage decline at that point. Here are the two most important words in Rishi Sunak's speech when you cut away all the political jargon: difficult decisions. Because Richard Heald referred to that £40 billion hole in the UK's budget. You can only repair that hole in two ways in the medium term. That is, you either raise taxes significantly, which will be difficult for the Conservative Party to handle. In fact, it will divide the party, or you have to cut public services. Austerity 2.0 after the austerity of a decade ago. The UK is entering its recession. It has its highest inflation rate in 40 years. 1 million more Britons will go into poverty in the next few months. And I'm afraid that Rishi Sunak will not cope with that, because he actually, instead of dealing with the difficulties of Brexit, called it the opportunities of Brexit, and then said, you know, if there are problems, it's all because of the pandemic and because Vladimir Putin invaded Ukraine. Don't blame us for that.
Right. Those are important points. Options, perhaps, to set the economy right would also be limited. And Richard, that is the next question to you. We've been seeing reports also from the likes of S&P that UK is in a recession. The next quarter, quarter four, is going to be a contraction of the UK economy. So keeping all of this in mind, how many options does he really have in his toolkit to set things right?
Well, as Professor Lucas indicated, he has not many options to, if you like, close the gap. Obviously, he will be hoping that the commodity prices will continue to work in his favour. Certainly, we've also seen that the yields on gilts have declined to a certain extent. But these are all very minor issues that he will have to deal with. I was listening quite closely to Mr. Thrall before we joined, and I think one of the things that is most relevant to what Mr. Thrall said is that here you have a Prime Minister who, if anyone within the Conservative Party, knows what the numbers are and knows what the problems are based on his experience. And therefore, I think that looking at the options, and he does have options, there are certain rollbacks that Jeremy Hunt did not announce, which certainly Prime Minister Sunak has been a proponent of in the past, that gives him some optionality, but really things are quite tough. But absolutely, it is steadying the markets and returning the degree of confidence, which will have an immediate impact on the cost of funding that the government has to pay.
Right. Professor Lucas, and I'll put final questions to our guests now. Professor Lucas, do you expect him to jump into that trade deal with India, or is he going to take some time, considering that he wouldn't like to be seen as giving concessions to India as a result of his Indian origin?
The issue is that no one can jump straight into a trade deal. Remember that Liz Truss had promised that we would have the trade deal by Diwali yesterday. That's not going to happen because it takes months, even years, to negotiate a trade deal. And as you have seen in your discussions with Mr. Tharoor, the issues that are raised in terms of mobility, in terms of tariffs, in terms of the relationships between financial markets, in terms of health and safety regulations, these are issues that very rarely are concluded within months. They usually take several years, 4 to 7 years for a trade agreement. So even if I think Rishi Sunak wants to will a trade agreement, it's not going to happen imminently. And I'd give the broader point. Remember that the holy grail for Brexit was going to be the trade agreement with the United States. That's off the table, not going to happen. So the reality is that the UK, at least for the foreseeable future, has cut itself off from Europe and has no market to replace that.
All right, we've run out of time, but Professor Lucas and Richard Heald, thank you very much for joining us here on Newscentre, giving us your view on economic priorities of Rishi Sunak. And let's see how he approaches the Indo-UK trade deal in the days to come. With that, it's a wrap on this edition of Newscentre. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.